Tonight, we began our newscast with ways that Donald Trump is clearly losing measurably with reactions in the markets and out in the country in a lot of these districts. That's partly because of how people think, feel, and are reacting to the results. Then there's the way that Donald Trump is losing in how to govern because he's exceeded his authority. And that story primarily takes place in the courts. Today, we have more news. A judge ruling that Donald Trump's admittedly sweeping pardons for January 6 convicts will not cover an individual who allegedly plotted to murder the FBI agents who were investigating him. That individual narrowing of basically how far the pardons might go comes as Trump's other orders are facing a range of challenges. We have this legal report card. This is just 2 weeks running. The X's show the areas that things are being paused or outright losing, and there's a heck of a lot more of them than orders going forward. You could also see that resistance that I'm talking about represented in Washington. There was a kind of emotional scene outside a key labor office where the individual who had been attempted to be fired by Trump returned to work because she went from a you're fired apprentice style to you're actually rehired based on the ruling by a judge.
This case was not about me. It was about the agency and the people who work for the agency and who are so dedicated to our mission.
This goes to bedrock principles of the United States government. On the one hand, the president has very broad authority and picks all of his or her own top people, like cabinet members and aides. On the other hand, there's a large federal bureaucracy. The president of the United States does not get to hire and fire every individual soldier. And no one thinks that would be a good idea, by the way. So the question in this case was actually kind of narrow. Was this the part of the government where the president gets his pick, like the cabinet, or was it something else? And the judge said it wasn't even close, that what Trump wanted were king-like powers to extend beyond those sections of the government I mentioned, ruling, quote, an American president is not a king. Trump is also making wholesale changes inside the Justice Department. There's an order that basically bans the federal government from working with law firms that represented individuals that he views as foes.
I just saw you sign executive orders for law firms. One of the law firms was Perkins Coie, yeah, that was the law firm that had the Steele dossier.
Yeah, they had the Steele dossier. They had a lot of other things, and we have a lot of law firms that we're going to be going after.
Some of those lawyers are hiring their own lawyers to try to challenge and fight what they view as obvious retribution. Donald Trump's answer in that interview also didn't exactly say, oh, we have other good faith reasons, this is about competence or performance. He just referred to that so-called dossier and the idea that any of these firms ever did something he didn't like. And just to remind you, unlike every other president in history, Trump is demanding a kind of absolute loyalty for contractors, for agencies that we've just never seen. I think that it's fair to say that the individual membership of the National Labor Relations Board is not the top tip of the spear issue right now. Interestingly, even the official kind of acknowledged that. But it, according to the judge in this case and the loss dealt to Donald Trump, it means something more. Can you edify us on that?
Yeah, this actually is quite an important development here. This is about a member of an independent commission that is supposed to be nonpartisan in function, one that was created by Congress. So there are all sorts of other issues, as you've noted, regarding cabinet appointees, maybe lower level, but there's controlling law on this specific issue that goes back to 1935, Supreme Court decision that prevents a president from just ignoring restrictions on removal that are provided in a statute for a commission like this. Now, as the judge in this case noted, that makes this an easy case for her. It'll probably make it an easy case for the D.C. Circuit if it gets up there. The question will be whether the Supreme Court affirms that old decision or tries to overturn it, and there are some indications that they may be willing to erode that. But for now, this is an important victory for Ms. Wilcox and for folks who want to see sort of the ordinary rules of the road still apply here.
Yeah, and a lot of this has come down to power. Many presidents, to be clear, have preferred readings of the law that expanded rather than limited their power. and some deliberately tested it. I mean, you read about Harry Truman trying to seize private business in law school because the question was, well, even in war, even for what was at the time seen as a good priority, what are the limits on those powers? And so here, Trump, unlike those presidents, doesn't even seem, and tell me your analysis, but from what I'm seeing, doesn't seem to care, doesn't seem to need it to be a big or important issue, doesn't care sometimes if past rulings, precedents, and laws already drew the line. He's availed of good counsel. Anyone who's not afraid to speak to him can say, well, just so you know, we can do this. But just so you know, this case was decided recently the other way. And so I wonder what you observe in that, that I'm not here telling viewers this is the worst ever thing that's never happened before. Other presidents have done things like this. But I can tell them that we have never seen it so wanton and so broad in its sort of power-hungry agenda.
Yeah, no, that's the thing that I like to focus people's attention on, because you're right. There are always efforts by a president in power to sort of push the boundaries a little bit and expand their power a little bit. What distinguishes what Trump is doing here from those prior situations is not only does Trump not care about these prior rulings, he has people on his staff who affirmatively want to overturn many of those rulings. And the second distinction, which is really important, is this isn't just a one-off. The volume and intensity of the things that Trump has been attempting to do here on so many different executive branch fronts, not just the firings, not just the purges of the civil service, but you also have the freezes on aid, the supposed, the impoundment of funds, and all sorts of other activities that are designed to dramatically expand the power of the executive branch and to dramatically limit the power of Congress. And that's a real sea change in our democracy if that sort of succeeds at the end of the day. And I think it's important for people to focus on that, because the daily in and out, it can be hard to follow. But this is part of a much larger effort.
Yeah, the other big news item, and we showed Trump speaking about it in that interview, was the crackdown on independent law firms, which tend to have membership of both parties, if you're counting. A lot of top Washington law firms have folks who've served in government under both parties' administrations. But he wants to crack down on those that he thinks have represented people he doesn't like, whether it's tied to Hillary Clinton or Jack Smith or what have you. For someone listening who says, all right, so what? What's your answer to that when we think about the tradition of independent legal advocacy in this country?
Yeah, and it is tempting for people to say, so what, because these seem like elite lawyers, fancy lawyers. But look, it is really dangerous for the government and the president himself to punish people simply because they happen to represent a viewpoint or have a client who represents a viewpoint that they do not like as a political matter. That is very, very dangerous. And this could be, something that if people just let it stand, you could easily see it encroaching even further into other spheres, into other industries as well. And by the way, Trump, I think Trump and his staff have indicated that, this might be about national security, or I think even someone mentioned DEI today. That is a farce and a pretext. I mean, I think everybody knows what's going on here, and he admitted it in the interview that you played. This is really about Perkins Coie representing the Democratic Party. Exactly. And that is not something that we should tolerate in this country.